In other news, the Public Investment Corporation is hosting top asset managers, at its G20 Dialogue in Pretoria. The focus is on new funding models that could help fast-track infrastructure projects and boost intra-Africa trade in an increasingly complex global economy. Newzroom Afrika's business reporter Ntokozo Khumalo is at the dialogue, and she joins us live for more on those discussions. Ntokozo, good morning. Issues like bankability, governance, investor protection, they're all dominating the conversation. These are big themes, especially, and big hurdles, especially when we look at the challenges here at home.
Absolutely, Michelle, looking at just that infrastructure gap that continues to widen, and now especially more important to close that gap on the back of those US tariffs that really is forcing the continent to think about those strategies a little faster on how to boost inter-Africa trade that's currently sitting at 18% or less of total trade. But to give us a little bit more insights around the solutions and the stakeholders that should be financing that infrastructure gap is Lungile Mashele, who is with the Special Office of Infrastructure and Energy with the Public Investment Corporation. Thank you so much for talking to us. Now, a few issues that you did highlight around the funding models that we need to start seeing to really fast-track infrastructure development on the continent, with South Africa taking the lead. Talk us through that.
Absolutely. So thank you very much for having me. Today, the PIC is launching its report on the funding modalities, listed and unlisted, to fund infrastructure on the continent. You've got your listed infrastructure, which can take many forms, such as bonds, listed equities, real estate trusts. You've also got on the unlisted side, which is typical project finance, debt, equity. However, we are seeing, I think over the last decade, we have seen blended finance, we're seeing triple Ps, and we need to start understanding that government alone cannot carry the infrastructure burden in South Africa. Private capital will need to be crowded in. Currently, government funds about 90% of infrastructure projects. This is unsustainable, particularly if you consider the limited balance sheets that they do have. So ultimately, the call that PIC is making today is that can we as private capital venture into infrastructure finance, but at a massive scale, bigger than what we've seen in the past. And this is our call through the G20 PIC perspectives that we're launching today.
And now we did hear from the likes of the Government Employees Pension Fund that does have exposure to infrastructure projects. A lot of challenges as well, though, when it comes to the scale that they can take up. You know, boards that are a little bit more risk averse because you are dealing with pensioners' money. But to fast track this economic growth, we really do need those infrastructure projects. Talk us through then some of the challenges that as asset managers you need to work around to also have that cohesive language across the continent.
So, you know, some of the challenges that asset managers face, you have a liquidity issue, right? So you're looking for assets that are very liquid. Every single month, you've got assets, you've got liabilities, you've got pensioners that are relying on an income. So you cannot have long lock-in periods for 15, 20 years. Regulation is so key. Money comes in. Money will only flow where there's certainty, where there is regulation. Then you have the issue around risk return, where yes, you are an asset manager and you are looking for returns, but you also need to take into account the level of risk that you're willing to take, one, but that your clients are also willing to actually take, especially because you're dealing with pension fund money, and people require to get paid or need their salaries or their pensions on a monthly basis. So you're very limited in so many aspects. Then you've also got issues around that this infrastructure asset needs to have some kind of a social imperative or environmental imperative. You can't just invest in everything that is out there. There's so many considerations from the client side also. GPF, mentioned that for them, returns are absolutely pivotal. And they're looking for good returns. And as the PIC, these are considerations we need to take into account, but also be an impact investor. You cannot just deliver on returns only. You need to understand you operate in a complex ecosystem where society needs to benefit also. And this is where infrastructure as an asset class becomes very, very important in leveraging those benefits.
And before I let you go, in South Africa, of course, we did see that investment in infrastructure, particularly around reforms in our energy, in our logistics space. Where does more work need to be done in South Africa, but also across the continent, especially for us to see then that intra-Africa trade go higher than 18%?
So I would not limit it to any sector really. Being an energy person, of course, there's a preference for, more energy projects, but everything operates in an ecosystem. If you unlock energy, you're able to unlock mineral wealth, beneficiation, which ultimately leads to the transportation of these goods, services. You're looking at rail, you're looking at roads, you are looking at the next level now where you need social infrastructure, which will then be tied to these projects. Where are people going to live? Social housing, and they need schools. If they're going to be living, working like in certain industrialized areas, like I said, they need housing, they need schools, there's healthcare. So everything, whether it's social infrastructure, economic infrastructure, everything is tied in one complex ecosystem.
Well, Lwile, let me let you go. Thank you so much for talking to us. Of course, Michelle Lungile Mashele is with the PIC, focusing on energy and infrastructure. And we are heading back into the session just to unpack some of those issues and the challenges that is faced by asset managers such as PIC across the continent in really boosting that infrastructure. And a very important conversation, Michelle, in context of those U.S. tariffs and the changing global trade environment. So I will give more updates a little bit later on once the report is released. It is embargoed until 1 p.m., but we are going to get a little bit more details on some of the outcomes, but also solutions that the PIC is putting on the table to fast-track infrastructure development on the continent, with South Africa taking the lead. Michelle.